we're talking about money and how financialization has moved forward and evolved, and now the new form of money that was created is cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
Talking about these new maybe monetary unions that they didn't have the technology back then. So I want to know your thoughts. What are your thoughts on this new technology, and
Okay, so DLT.
yeah, and where do you think it'll go in the future?
Yeah, so complex question, and we're working on it. We're working on understanding. Cryptocurrencies aren't really money. What are cryptocurrencies, first of all? There is a plethora of cryptocurrencies. So we should be talking really about DLT-based money, so money on the distributed ledger technology. And but if we are taking the example of Bitcoin, Ethereum, those aren't money, or they acquire some of the. I don't want to get too specific, but they acquire some aspects of commodity money, some of the forms of money when gold was money, but they're not really money. So if, however, then we explore central bank digital currencies, which can be DLT based, then we start talking, or better, we shouldn't be confusing them with cryptocurrencies, because central bank digital currencies, they would be liabilities of a central bank, whereas Bitcoin isn't a liability of anyone. So this is why cryptocurrencies in general is a very broad area. Now, in terms of CBDCs, which I suppose we can call, I mean, they're part of cryptocurrencies. Again, it's a matter of the institutional setup. They can be slightly dangerous for the stability of the legacy financial system, because, of course, if you have a central bank that creates a central bank digital currency, then why do you need banks anymore to provide a deposit account, current accounts? But again, that's a matter of the institutional setup. So that's why central banks are spending lots of money and lots of time in understanding what are the threats and how to prevent the CBDC hurting the legacy financial system. But they might be, if you have these programmable currencies, they might actually work very well if you want to be a little extravagant with the monetary arrangements. At least that's an exploratory thought that I have in my mind. No, but if your question is more about Bitcoin, then I can tell you it's not money. It has some money forms, so it has some forms that appear like money or that look like money, but then we would be entering this whole issue of value and what is value in the digital economy, and it's a totally different question, and it becomes difficult to answer. But no, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, the private cryptocurrencies, they are not money. They are financial assets. They're not money in an MMT sense, because they're not issued by anyone. In this sense, they look much more like gold, like commodity money, and that's why we say that they have some forms of commodity money, but they're not credit. And if your understanding is that credit is money, or money is credit, either way, then they cannot be money. Whereas central bank digital currency, even if it is DLT based, can be credit. It can be a liability of the central bank. Just it's essentially replacing the banknotes, which are money, legal tender, but there are also credits by the central bank.
Especially looking at the fact that gold is a good example. The fact that Bitcoin has a limited amount of supply.
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
It is interesting, but that's a financial asset. That is purely speaking a financial asset. The fact that it has a limited amount of units in circulation, it's just a feature of the financial asset. And I mean, if you buy stocks, there are a limited amount of stocks in circulation, and unless they issue more. But it's pretty much the same idea. Of course, it's slightly different because, again, stocks are liabilities of a corporation, whereas the fascinating thing is that Bitcoin is not a promise to pay anything.
Mm.
So if the question really is, okay, one can start with the question, what is the value of money? And then there are different ideas. Some would say money has no value. Some would say money, the value of money is what you can buy with that money. And others would say, well, the original value of money was the amount of commodity in that money. So if you had one coin made of gold, the original value was the gold in that coin. Then, of course, it can be detached, but the original at least. So if you ask this question and now you apply it to Bitcoin, what is the intrinsic value of Bitcoin? What is the use value? It has no use value. So you cannot use Bitcoin to satisfy any of your needs or wants. You cannot do anything with Bitcoin. Of course, you can exchange it. So it has an exchange value, but a use value. In use, you cannot do anything with it. So it doesn't have an intrinsic value. Yet it is traded at a very high price. And that's why we say it has some commodity form. It looks like a commodity, even if it's not a commodity, because it has no use value. These are Marxian terms in a sense, because they're very useful when you're looking at the commodities as goods and services that are produced with the purpose of exchanging them, and Bitcoin is very peculiar because it has no use value, but it has an exchange value, and so it's impossible to determine what its intrinsic value is, but it still has a high exchange value or a high price. So that is fascinating. Again, as I said, we would be entering the whole idea, the whole discussion of digital commodities and so on, but hopefully perhaps another project like this one comes out of our conversations that we are having on the side. But yeah, I think that is as much as I can say. I think the distinction amongst the different kind of cryptocurrencies is fundamental. And yes, the question is about cryptocurrencies, but the reality is when you're asking a question about cryptocurrencies, you have in mind only one of the several different types of cryptocurrencies. Private,
Really,
public.
the two, there's like the main ones, and
Yeah, there are private, there are public, but then there are again, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin that are issued not as a liability of anyone, and cryptocurrencies that are issued that make use of similar technology, the distributed ledger, but that they represent a liability of the central bank. Crucially different, economically speaking, diametrically opposed concepts, but using similar technology or the same technology. So the question then is, are cryptocurrencies defined by their economic role or by the technology that they use? Is it DLT technology, or is it something else that defines what a cryptocurrency is? I have, of course, my interpretation of it. I think that we should be looking at the technology and then look at all the different types of cryptocurrencies that use the same technology or similar technologies that are comparable. And but some might say, look, CBDCs and Bitcoin, they're so different that we shouldn't even be calling both of them cryptocurrencies. They should, perhaps only Bitcoin should be a cryptocurrency and CBDC should be called, I don't know, CBDC and nothing else. So that is a matter of definition. I think it's all so very new that we don't really, we are still making it on the go, and even central banks. That's why we don't really have many CBDCs around, because even central banks don't feel perhaps comfortable enough to put them in place, or they're trying to put them in place. And as building a monetary, that is essentially building a new monetary system. You cannot just turn it on one day and let it work, because it's going to either collapse or replace the old one. And if it's going to replace the old one, then you find yourself with a commercial banking system that is collapsed overnight. And that is not good. That is not good, because then who's going to take over the role of banks?
But this is what fascinates me, is the world we're looking at going forward, because a lot of people are calling for the end of the old fiat system, and they want to go back to is it right to say commodity or commodity-based financial system,
Commodity money.
and I always think, because we're so used to this fiat system and how credit has just been expanded and how it's spread up investment and easy money, essentially. If we were to go back to having some scarcity at the basis of our financial system, what does that look like? Could we be able to finance all that we have financed in the past?
Well, no. You would have to deal with extremely deflationary pressures, and it would be a totally different scenario from the globalized system that we've seen in the last in the last half a century. But the reality is that fiat money has been around for centuries. It would be very different if we were to go back. Well, no, that's the point. We cannot really go back to a commodity money system, because I do think that the what's called the crypto maximalists, what they have in mind is go to a system where you use Bitcoin and there is no central bank whatsoever.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past we have had central banks or monetary authorities, they still had commodity money, but then who can decide what the value of the coin was just by stamping a number on it. So we've had combination, and the history of monetary system is fascinating because it takes a long time, and we have different money forms that coexist, and the process of replacing one with the other is not as straightforward. And so at least in my reading of it, we had the monetary commodity based money, and then it developed and was replaced by a fiat, not a fiat, but a credit system. But the fiat overlapped the two, because again, as I said, you could have a coin that had X amount of gold in it, but if you stamped on it a different value than the amount of gold, then it was still then the number stamped on it was what was the value of the coin, not the material in it. So for a brief, not so brief, but for a period of time, we had these combinations of commodities, but fiat, or and then eventually credit. I think the issue with the crypto maximalist thinking is money is a thing, credit is another one, and because of the current monetary system and the cartelist approach of MMT that we've discussed earlier is part of it, there is this tendency to equate credit and money, and to say money is credit, credit is money, full stop. My take is different. I do think that we need to have a monetary theory of credit, that money predates credit, although credit forms acquire some of the purposes of money. But I do think that the crypto maximalists confuse the two, in the sense that they think of going back to Bitcoin. It's not clear to me, once you go back to Bitcoin, what happens to banks in their mind. How do you finance if you want a mortgage on a house, or do you even need a mortgage on a house if you're using Bitcoin now? Because clearly they want to replace the monetary system with a commodity-based money, but I have never heard any of them make any statement on the credit system. How is credit going to be managed? Who's going to issue loan? Who's going to give out loans? Are loans still going to be there? Are we going to just have institutions that accumulate Bitcoins and then they lend out Bitcoins that are not in use? If this is the case, then that is going to be a massively contractionary force in the economy. We moved away from that system because we needed more, quote unquote, money in circulation.
And that's what I think they perhaps don't really address, or even how we deal with recessions. What would be the approach under this system? Or perhaps are they alluding to this quasi-commodity based and also credit-based system, which kind of combines, and I don't know the ins and outs. But
well, I suppose some of them without even knowing it, might think that they might think in a very heterodox approach that the credit cycle dictates recessionary periods. And in a sense, if you take away credit, you will take away recessions that are caused by credit. But when you have an exogenous shock,
What do you do?
what do you do? Exactly. I know that some of them have ideas of treasuries within the cryptocurrency, like that accumulate and that spend, make some investments. But no, I think there is large confusion between legacy financial system. I mean, the financial system that we have right now, and monetary and money as such, because clearly we confuse, or better, I mean, even Marx himself, not to be one of those people who says, "Oh, Marx said it," but Marx himself talks about no, but it's important because of the methodology of doing economics. So they're working on different levels of abstraction. But Marx himself talks of this idea of money confusion, meaning we talk about money, but in reality, with the same name, we refer to very different phenomena. So when we talk about money, if I tell you send me some money, if you give me a banknote, and if you send me a bank transfer, we are talking. I'm still fine, and I'm still telling you send me some money, and we still understand each other. But you're sending me to very different things that then are connected to one another because of the fact that the central bank allows the commercial banks to go to it if it needs to have some of the currency to put in circulation and so on. But they're different things. So as a society, we are confused about what money is, because money, the same name, has come to cover so many different forms of money. And I think that within the Bitcoin cryptocurrency debate, this confusion will come to light if that transition appears, because we will realize, oh, wait a second, we were talking about money, but we were talking about central bank money, physical money, bank credit, non-bank credit, and so on and so forth, unit of account, and so on and so forth. And if you just say, oh, we replace all of those with Bitcoin, that does not make any sense. You might be able to replace the official money, if you want, with Bitcoin, and then you leave banks out, but then banks are going to have to issue credit in some other instruments because they're not going to accumulate Bitcoins. And it's simply not going to work for them to accumulate Bitcoins and lend them out. So I do think that there is a bit of confusion on how monetary and financial systems work, and how they overlap and how they do not overlap at all in some other areas, and those are not really answered. If you want to follow the cryptocurrency, the crypto maximalist, you need to rethink not only money and credit, but the whole system of government, because you really are getting rid of monetary policy, but you also need a totally reinvented fiscal policy and industrial policy, because now you're going to have treasuries that are creating cryptocurrencies and are spending it. And so you're only going to have a fiscal policy in a sense. It's not even fiscal policy any longer, but and then you have CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, but those might actually be a big disappointment, in the sense that those might end up being exactly like cash, just in a digital form, which to me is a bit of a disappointment, because you're excited, there is something new, who knows what it's going to be. But the way in which, in order not to be disruptive for the legacy financial system, it seems that it might go in the direction of simply being a replacement for cash.